Class 3, English 1. This video is related to the lesson uploaded on 5th of August. Lesson Subject and Predicate. Hello, this is your Gopa ma'am once again. I'm back with your English 1 lesson. Now last week we did a revision on nouns, proper nouns and common nouns, and I'm sure my last 2 videos were clear enough to make you understand the basic differences between common nouns and proper nouns. Now children, today I'll teach you a lesson on subject and predicate. Now this video is a revision on subject and predicate, and this lesson has already been taught to you in the mentioned date. Now to start with, let's define the sentence first. What is a sentence? A sentence is a group of words that makes complete sense. For example, I love to read books. Now children, a sentence can be divided into 2 parts. First part and the second part. The first part is the subject and the second part is the predicate. Can you tell me what is this sentence about? This sentence tells us about I. I is the first part of the sentence. The first part of a sentence that names or tells what the sentence is about is called the subject. The first part of this sentence is I. This sentence is about I. So I is the subject. I is the doer of the action. Here the sentence is about the sun. So the subject is the sun. Now let us come to the second part of the sentence. The underlined part of the sentence tells us about the subject, that is I. The second part of a sentence that tells us about the subject, that is what the subject does, is called the predicate. In other words, the predicate explains an action which is done by the subject. The second part of this sentence, love to read books, tells us about I. What is I doing? What is the action being mentioned here? So, this part tells us about I. I is the subject we are talking about. And this part tells us what I is doing. It states the action, which is the second part, which forms the predicate. So, the predicate is that part of the sentence that usually starts with the verb and that tells us about the subject. Let us understand this by means of another example. The second example is Pragya bought a laptop. Now what is this sentence about? The first part tells us about the sentence. The sentence is about Pragya. So Pragya is the subject here. Children, to identify the subject, it is very important for us to read the sentence and ask what is the sentence about. That means what is the verb part talking about. So the verb part, bought a laptop, is talking about Pragya. Here, Pragya is the subject. Now, bought a laptop. This forms the second part of the given sentence. So, this part tells us about Pragya. What Pragya is doing or what Pragya has done. Again, to identify the predicate, we have to ask, what does the sentence tell about the subject? That means, what does the second part tell us about Pragya? So, bought a laptop becomes the predicate, which is the second part of this sentence. Let me tell you that when we identify the subject and predicate in a sentence, for example, in imperative sentences, usually you won't be finding any subject. The subject is always implied. In most of the times, the subject will not be mentioned. You have to understand when you read the sentence, you have to understand the implied subject. Let us take an example. Now, I hope you remember what an imperative sentence is. An imperative sentence is used to make an order or a command, request, or give advice. For example, shut the door. Now, this sentence begins with a verb. This is not a noun or a pronoun. As I have already told you that the first part, the subject, is usually a naming word or a pronoun. So here we find this sentence, since this is an imperative sentence, an order, a command. So this starts with a verb. Now, you have to understand the subject is implied. Since it is an example of an imperative sentence, the subject is not mentioned. So what is the implied subject? The implied subject is you. Hope you have understood the lesson. Now it's time to discuss the worksheet. Now children, in your worksheet I have given an exercise related to subject and predicate. Read the instructions given in part 2. What you have to do is you have to draw 2 columns using a scale. Now that's very important. Now draw 2 columns and label one column as the subject and the other as the predicate. Now take a look at this clip. I have given you examples of how to divide each sentence into its subject and its predicate. When you receive your answer key, do not forget to tally your answers with the answer key. Stay safe. Meet you in the next class.